Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Racine County Sheriff's Office Patrol Station. My name is Sheriff Christopher Schmaling, S-C-H-M-A-L-I-N-G, and standing to my left is Sergeant Mike Luell, L-U-E-L-L. Also want to thank citizens from Racine County who are here today, who brought forward certain complaints. I want to thank them for being here, number one, taking time out of your schedule, as well as your bravery for coming forward and doing the right thing. So thank you for that. I'm going to read a little bit more than I normally do during press conferences. This is an incredibly complex investigation, as you can imagine, and I want to make certain that we clearly explain all the facts. Before we begin our presentation, which you will hear and learn about our entire investigation process, that I must explain our agency's role in this entire process. Listen, I understand the level of controversy regarding the last presidential election. Like all citizens in Wisconsin, we have learned about a statewide investigation that's been ongoing, led by retired Justice Gableman. We're all hearing from prominent individuals around our state, and they're lending their opinion about various topics with respect to the election. I'm here today to tell you that I'm not affiliated with that investigation whatsoever, and nobody from that investigation has reached out to me for assistance. That said, I have no knowledge about their investigation other than what I've read in the local newspaper and what I've seen on television. In fact, my office received this complaint nearly a year ago, actually approximately 10 months, before anyone else was announcing about any sort of similar investigation. So I want to be clear. What I want to say is it's not my intention at all. The purpose of this investigation is to try to change the outcome of the investigation or any single vote for any past election. I do, however, hope that shedding light on this investigation to our community members will bring about change and mandate that the Wisconsin Elections Commission follow the state statutes as it pertains to our election. That is the only way, in my view, that we'll establish fairness and restore integrity in our entire statewide election process. As your sheriff here in Racine County, it is my role to serve the citizens of Racine County. In fact, my job, my statutory obligation, is to investigate crime that occurs within this county. In this particular complaint, I didn't go out looking for a complainant. Rather, the complaint came to us. It was immediately assigned to our investigative division, like any other complex investigation would have. It was assigned nearly a year ago, as I mentioned earlier, to Sergeant Luell. I asked Sergeant Luell to conduct a thorough investigation and to follow that investigation to its logical conclusion. My agency does not have the luxury of picking and choosing which criminal complaints we want to investigate because it may draw some controversial public criticism. Rather, we remain objective. We collect facts, we compile reports, we issue those reports, and ultimately forward those to our district attorney for her review for possible charges. That is the case with all criminal investigations, regardless of the topic. And that is certainly the case in this investigation. You will not hear about our opinions in this investigation because that also doesn't matter. What you will speak about are the facts of the investigation and the facts only. I will warn you, however, this isn't your typical criminal investigation. It's complex, to be quite frank. It's a bit challenging to understand at first. However, Sergeant Luell and I provided and prepared a very comprehensive PowerPoint presentation and a timeline so that our citizens can better understand how the election law was broken. Sergeant Luell and I are here today to talk about the complaint we received from a citizen in our county. In fact, some of these citizens, as I mentioned, are already here today. They're not here to answer your questions, rather to put a face on the election law that was broken. I don't know how or who they voted for. I didn't ask because it doesn't matter. Furthermore, our victims are here today and their families have elected not to talk to the media. I'm asking you today to respect that. However, Judy, whose mom was a victim of election integrity at Ridgewood Healthcare, wanted me to share a quote about her now deceased mother. Quote, "My mom was a fighter and would be happy and pleased to know that people are fighting for her rights," unquote. Judy, thank you again for being here. I'm so sorry about your loss. I must tell you, some of my friends here in the media have headlined this event today as some type of political event. I'm here to tell you that that is not true. The purpose of this presentation today is not political. It's not about Democrats, it's not about Republicans, it's about integrity, It's about accountability in the election process. We all of us want elections laws to be followed. All of us want elections to be fair. We all also want to know that our vote counts regardless of who we voted for. That is correct, and by the end of this presentation today, you will see firsthand that the election statute was in fact not just broken, but shattered by members of the WEC, that is the Wisconsin Elections Commission. You will learn the Wisconsin Election Commission is made up of 6 commissioners who serve staggered 5-year terms. The commissioners are appointed by the legislative leaders or the governor. They serve on a part-time basis, and they are in fact an agency under the governor of the state of Wisconsin. You should know the WEC holds routine meetings that are recorded and available for public view and review on their website. With that said, you will see during our presentation today, directly from some of the commission members from the WEC, talk openly about how they are going to violate the state's election statute. You will hear information about SVDs, those are special voting deputies, and they were not sent into facilities like Ridgewood, nursing homes throughout the state of Wisconsin. You will learn this complaint stems from Ridgewood Care Center, which is a senior living senior home located in the village of Mount Pleasant, right here in Racine County. You'll learn, like most investigations, when we start peeling back the onion, we have 1 complaint and 7 additional complaints from that same facility came about. Some of them, individuals are here today, some of them could not make it due to scheduling conflicts. You will also learn that the staff at Ridgewood and all senior care facilities throughout the state of Wisconsin received the same instructions by the WEC not to follow the election statute. It is my belief that a government that creates laws should be a government that enforces the law. Racine County, I'm going to talk a little bit about Sergeant Llewell very briefly, and he's going to start his PowerPoint. Racine County is fortunate to have Sergeant Llewell because he has a very unique skill set. Sergeant Llewell is also a lawyer. He spent 10 years as a prosecutor, beginning of his career, right here in Racine County, prosecuting some of the most violent crimes that Racine County has. And I can tell you that Racine County, to say that Racine County is a safer place because of the work Sergeant Llewell has done would be an understatement. Moving forward in the sergeant's career, he's been a sworn law enforcement officer in the state of Wisconsin, working patrol, investigations as a supervisor in administration. Sergeant Llewell has spent hundreds and hundreds of hours compiling this investigation, interviewing citizens, putting together a subpoena for documents, and compiling these timelines that you see here before you today. And he will put this PowerPoint presentation on in just a moment. I will tell you, it does take about 20 minutes to go through this PowerPoint presentation. The good news is he does talk fast, so we'll get through it pretty quickly. And at the conclusion of our PowerPoint presentation, we will entertain some questions from the media. Please keep in mind that all members of the media will be given a complete copy of this PowerPoint presentation and of the timeline for your review later. So, without further ado, Sergeant Llewell.
Thank you, Sheriff. We got a little crowded up here. I'm gonna move this one. I promise to speak loud, and it'll pick up my voice. All right, as stated, I am Sergeant Michael Llewell with the Racine County Sheriff's Office. My current duties are to be an administrative sergeant, and also I'm our public information officer. Prior to that, I worked investigations, and when I made the transition, needs to follow the law. This case starts with a very brave woman named Judy. She had a mother who was a resident at the Ridgewood Care Facility, and unfortunately, her mother passed October 9th, 2020, clearly before the November 3rd presidential, and there was other races going on that day, election. Judy was curious. After her mother passed, after the election, she checked on myvotewisconsin.com, which anyone can do, and she was able to learn that her mother's vote actually counted in that election after her mother had passed on. It was interesting to note that Judy's mother, whose name is Shirley, was experiencing severe cognitive decline, Physically, she was in decline, and to some degree, she was giving up on life, unfortunately, in her last days. She didn't want to keep up on current events, didn't watch TV, didn't read, and was just at a low point before she passed. So Judy was concerned, and Judy reached out to the Ridgewood Care Facility, said, how could my mother possibly have voted? And she was informed by the executive director that the Wisconsin Election Commission authorized the employees of these facilities to execute the vote, which, by the way, is a direct violation of law, which we will learn soon. Judy was obviously concerned and asked, how could you actually do this? And she was informed that the employees would inquire as to how the resident had voted in the past, and they would basically follow those guidelines and vote accordingly. Judy quite astutely asked, are you telling me that if my mother could only recall JFK, that the staff would have voted Democrat for her? And the answer was yes, in the affirmative. That's what they said. Judy inquired about her mother's severe problems seeing. She had vision problems. She had broken glasses for months that she didn't even care about fixing because she had given up to some degree. And Judy asked, how could my mother know that her vote was recorded accurately? She couldn't see. And Judy was informed by the staff that the staff hoped that the other employees would be honest. Hoped. So Judy followed the appropriate channels. She researched the Wisconsin Elections Commission, which is supposed to ensure free and fair elections, and she filed a sworn affidavit with the Wisconsin Elections Commission. By the way, the penalty for falsely swearing in an affidavit are criminal penalties, a fine, jail time, etc. But she felt strongly enough about this that she filed that sworn affidavit with the Wisconsin Elections Commission, voicing her concern that the facility took advantage of her mother due to her mother's diminished mental capacity and filled out ballots in her name. Judy documented her mother's broken glasses and poor vision. She documented that her own mother couldn't recognize her own daughter. She documented that her mother couldn't remember what she had eaten that day or even what day it was at all. And unfortunately, Judy's mother was experiencing hallucinations. She was seeing flying objects outside of the window, up where the wall meets the ceiling, that weren't there. She was in severe cognitive decline. So after filing this sworn affidavit, a complaint of voter integrity issues, the Wisconsin Elections Commission said, nah, this isn't really what we investigate. This isn't what we do. And they forwarded it to the Racine County District Attorney's Office. The Racine County District Attorney's Office forwarded it to the Sheriff's Office. I was an investigator at the time, and I was assigned to look into this complaint by this citizen, which is what I did. At the beginning of my investigation, I formulated a team of investigators, and eventually we went out to Mount Pleasant Village Hall. The voting occurred in Mount Pleasant. They have a voting clerk. I'm just starting to scratch the surface, so we go talk to the voting clerk. I had no idea what the law was at this point in time. I'm just scratching the surface. The voting clerks provide me with letters they received from the Wisconsin Elections Commissions, which ordered them not to send special voting deputies into retirement facilities. At the time, I didn't even know what a special voting deputy was and why that is so important. But a special voting deputy is appointed. There's two of them, one from each of the major parties, one Democratic, one Republican. They are trained, they take a sworn oath, they then accept the ballots, they go to residential care facilities, and they execute the vote. And they do so under Wisconsin State Statute 6.875, which we're going to get into in just a moment. What also was interesting that I discovered is the voting clerks told me that there was an unusual surge of voting activity at the Ridgewood Care Facility. They informed me, and they gave me documentation, I formulated a spreadsheet, that 42 people voted in the presidential election, when normally only approximately 10 people vote in an election, be it a presidential election or an off-year type election. They informed me that 38 people requested applications for absentee ballots, when normally, for any other election, it's about 0 to 3. Now, I think we're all of the belief, and we can embrace the idea that voting is good, and there's nothing wrong with more voting. But manipulating people, taking advantage of people, preying on people who are in cognitive decline, I think that's some of the concerns that the families have, that's some of the concerns that I have, and frankly, I think it's some of the concerns that the public will have. At the end of our interviews at Mount Pleasant, they provided me with copies of the application for absentee ballots, and they provided me with the ballot envelopes. What's very important is we will never see the ballots. We never know how the ballots voted. We don't care. We have the ballot envelope, which documents the process. Once again, we're not trying to change one vote. We're not trying to change one election. We are trying to hold our government accountable and force them to follow the laws that they pass. So this is the letter that came out March 12th. The timeline is important. We'll get to the timeline in a minute, and you're going to get all this documentation, so don't worry about it. But the Wisconsin Elections Commission on March 12th sent out a letter, and they state municipalities shall not use the special voting deputy process. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not a process, it's a law, 6.875. What they're saying here is they're telling municipalities to not follow the law. Coincidentally, they say it's because special voting deputies are considered non-essential. And I did an open records request and said, how did you come to the determination that special voting deputies are non-essential? And they basically just referenced me back to this letter, and by implication stated, well, we just decided so. That's the best I can understand. And they made this decision on March 12th because they believed it was not feasible to implement any type of screening process prior to the spring election. We're talking spring. This goes on and on and on. While I'm there, I received these documents. I took them back to our office and I examined them. And what was concerning about the application for absentee ballots is that there's a certification in there. There's a certification people have to make whether they're indefinitely confined. That certification, if made falsely, has penalties of their criminal, possible fine, jail, or both. What I saw and was able to document is these applications were pre-filled out for the residents, and the certification was either checked before and sometimes after the resident put their signature on this document. And some of these family members are here today to tell you they do not believe their loved ones had the cognitive ability to understand that document. Furthermore, there's voter envelopes that contain the ballot. Can't stress it enough. We don't know how the ballots were executed, who they voted for. We don't care. We do care that the process, which is called the law, was not followed. And these voting envelopes were executed by the staff of the facilities, which is explicitly prohibited by the statute. Furthermore, I learned that there are multiple letters from the WEC which correspond to open records meetings that they had. So later in my investigation, I went and I watched those open meetings and found some very relevant material. This is an example of an application for absentee ballot. It's all pre-filled out. The signature was there. Here's the certification for being indefinitely confined, which states if you do this and it's not true, you face a $1,000 fine, 6 months in jail, or both. There were times it was pre-filled out. There were times that the voting clerks at the village hall checked this box, which if you do inappropriately, you can be put in jail. So now I had to dive into the law. As a criminal prosecutor, as a criminal investigator, we normally deal with Chapter 940, crimes against persons, Chapter 943, crimes against property, 961 is drugs. We don't deal with Chapter 6. All right, I'm in new water here. But I do my research, and I find 6.84, and it's the legislative policy of voting in person versus absentee voting. And the legislature passed this. So that means Democrats and Republicans came together, presumably it was approved by a governor, and they stated they were concerned about fraud or abuse, overzealous solicitation of absentee voting, and or undue influence. And that's what these family members are here today, because they have concern that that happened to their loved ones. This is really the meat and potatoes. 6.875, and later we're going to see 12.13. Okay, these two statutes work hand in hand. I know we're getting a little deep here with the law, but this is so very important. Realize the words shall, when you read a statute, isn't maybe, isn't if you feel like it, isn't it if you have time. The word shall is you must. Realize no or shall not means just that. It is a definitive statement. Chapter 6.875 can be a little complicated. There's different parts to it, but I just brought some of the main parts, the tip of the iceberg here, out on this slide. This statute is the exclusive means of absentee ballot voting. Very important. A couple down there. No employee past 2 years may be an SVD. No employee may do this. The SVDs shall witness the vote, and the SVDs may assist. No individual other than an SVD or a relative may assist the voter. That means the staff at the facility absolutely, positively cannot, by this law, assist in the execution of the vote. Now, I have to give the Wisconsin Elections Commission, this is kind of their theory. This is the pony that they're running. I will let you know that the governor's office told them at the beginning of this process they can't do this. I will tell you that the Legislative Council at the end of this process, which is highlighted in the timeline, told them what you're doing is not legal, not appropriate. You can't do it. But it was the theory of the WEC to use the back end of this statute kind of as like a loophole. And they theorized that 6.875 sub 6 sub E gave them a little leeway. And that statute holds that if the special voting deputies make 2 attempts to get the elector to vote and they're unsuccessful, the ballot shall then be mailed to the voter. But the problem the SVD that the Wisconsin Election Commission has is they decided to never even bother to try to send the special voting deputies. They had inconsistent positions where at times they said, the SVDs are never going to be let in. At times they said the special voting deputies will only be let in occasionally. At times they said there will be no uniformity about how many special voting deputies are let in, how many are not let in, so we should just do it this way and just mail it. Forget the statute, forget all the shalls, forget the shall nots, just mail it and tell the employees at the facility, yeah, you can help them. You can help them and these people vote. That's what the WEC decided. In contrast to the law, in contrast to the advice of the governor's office, in contrast to the Legislative Council, and in contrast to the United States Constitution. The United States Constitution clearly states that the only body that can create or change elections laws is the legislature of the state. We have 3 branches of government. The governor is in the executive branch. He is not in the legislature. The governor said, I can't change this law. His office did, at least, his chief legal counsel. Yet an agency of the executive branch, an agency of the governor, said, nah, we'll do it. We'll do it on our own, against the law. So during the course of our investigation, myself and my colleagues went to Ridgewood, and we talked to the people who were employed there. I had the executive director tell me exactly what he told Judy, that he hoped his staff would be honest. The recreational therapy director actually told me if a resident could only point at the ballot, that's what the employee of the facility would mark. If all they could do is point, the employee would mark wherever I guess they pointed. The activities aide, she was a young lady, 18 years of age at the time, certainly not considered subject matter experts like the WEC is supposed to be. She was informed if these residents didn't want to vote right then and there, if they didn't have mental clarity, she was instructed, point them at the TV, turn on the news, and come back in a day or two and see if they were lucid enough to vote. That is literally the advice that she got, taking advantage of the loved ones of these people that we have sitting here, and others. Furthermore, these ballots, when they weren't executed, were floating around the facility, unsealed, in the ballot envelope, just floating around the facility. And remember, the law states only SPDs are to receive the ballot, and they are to maintain the possession of the ballot. I further interviewed the individuals, let me go back one, about the procedure that they use to have people vote. The ballot envelope has a 5-step process. Step number 1 is very, very simple. Have the person vote, put the ballot in the envelope, seal the envelope. I was informed by the employees that either A, the resident would vote, they dropped the ballot in the envelope, they wouldn't seal it, or the resident would not vote, and they would take that unmarked ballot, it would float around the facility for a couple days, and then they would try to get that resident to vote again. Either way, the ballot envelope would remain unsealed until they eventually delivered it to a higher level employee who then sealed them all up and then mailed them back to Mount Pleasant. Meaning that there was no, what we would call in law enforcement, satisfactory chain of custody, and these ballots are just floating about. This is an example of a ballot envelope. Here's the 5-step process, not very difficult to figure out. Step 1, place your voted ballot inside the envelope and seal it. Do not use tape or glue. I don't necessarily blame these employees. They weren't trained, and they were asked to do tasks that they shouldn't have to do. So, I developed a spreadsheet. There's 48 residents who voted, and I knew from Judy that she believed her mother did not have the mental capacity, because of her cognitive issues, to request a ballot and to exercise her right to vote. And people have a right to vote. We don't want to stifle any voting. People have a right to vote. But we were concerned that people were being taken advantage of. So I contacted those 48 families. I contacted their contact person, and I told them, I hope and pray that your loved one is of sound mind, of sound body, but if they do have cognitive difficulties, tell me please if you want to share that. And I had 7 families who informed me that their loved one, in their opinion, didn't have the cognitive ability to request a ballot or to exercise their right to vote. I'm not going to go into each and every one. There's a couple slides here. You'll be able to look at that later. But what else is also interesting is that I went to My Vote Wisconsin and I checked out these individuals' voting history. And almost all of them hadn't voted since 2012, or voted maybe just once. If you look at the first one, OF, there's no record of OF voting in any other election. You look at the next to the right there, the daughter of that individual said her dad was only interested in Doritos and Snickers, and he had not voted in any other election since 2012. Going to the next 3, once again, no real history of voting, and you can review this later. Going to the next 2, no real issue of voting. If you look at the very last one, BH would ask her own son, "Who are you?" She couldn't even recognize her own son. And she happened to vote in 2 elections in 2020, but no other elections. So once again, I'm kind of learning this throughout my investigation. So I had asked myself, what is the Wisconsin Election Commission? This is them. As the sheriff mentioned, there's 6 members. 3 are appointed by Democrats, 3 are appointed by Republicans. Coincidentally, 2 of them are attorneys also, and they had very strange and suspect legal opinions in this matter. Now the timeline. The timeline of this whole situation is very interesting. And the timeline is also here. You'll get your own copies of it. But March 10th, 2020, COVID is a grave concern, and the Wisconsin Election Commission writes a letter that's signed by a variety of the commissioners. They write a letter stating we need to suspend the special voting deputy law. They might even call it they call it a program at sometimes. I don't really understand it as a law. There's also something with polling places. I'm not going to get into the weeds of that. But what's interesting is the governor's office tells the Wisconsin Elections Commission, which is an agency under the governor does not have the power to suspend parts of Wisconsin's voting law even during an emergency. The governor can't do it. So on March 12, 2020, the governor enacts Executive Order number 72, which is basically when he shut down the state for COVID. That same day, just hours after that order comes down, the Wisconsin Elections Commission figures out how to use technology to have a virtual meeting where they all meet from different parts of the state. It's a Zoom call, and they decide they're going to issue that directive, that letter I showed you before, which tells each municipality throughout every county in the state of Wisconsin not to follow the special voting deputy law, which is Wisconsin State Statute 6.875. They direct that the special voting deputies shall not be sent to facilities. Commissioner Knudsen even states, and I will preface this, he was talking about the polling places, but he even states that we need the flexibility to not follow the law. They flat out say it in their meeting. They need the flexibility to not follow the law. You know, the sheriff and I talked about this a little bit. COVID is serious. It's scary. We get it. Right at the beginning, when the state shut down, we kind of call it our hair on fire moment. Everybody was freaking out. They're scared. They have grave concerns. We understand. Some drastic decisions were made. Well, you know what? Time marches on. And it marches on to May 26th, 2020, when the Safer at Home order expires. Not only does the WEC not have the authority to do what they did in an emergency, they certainly do not have the power to do what they did when the emergency order has completely expired. There's nothing out there anymore whatsoever. They convene a meeting, that being the Wisconsin Elections Commission, on June 24th, 2020, citing no legal authority, they decide to extend the suspension of the special voting deputy program, which is a law. Commissioner Knudsen literally states, we need to go back to following the law, but not for SVDs. Commissioner Spindell states he's concerned with fraud in nursing homes and suggests, why don't we send the SVDs in? We can use PPEs, we can take appropriate precautions. And at one point, Commissioner Spindell, because he's from Milwaukee, states that he literally has hundreds of ballots floating around residential care facilities. Hundreds of ballots unsecure, just in his area. And there's 72 counties in the state of Wisconsin. Nonetheless, at this meeting, the WEC votes 5-1. Spindell votes against it, 5-1, to suspend the special voting deputy law. Moving forward, they have a meeting set for September 16th. It's my understanding that they actually hold a meeting on September 25th. Nonetheless, one thing on their agenda is to discuss what are we doing with these special voting deputies, and basically, should we be doing it? Spindell, once again, comes forward and asks the law states we're supposed to do something, we're not doing it, where does that power come from? And nobody really answers that question because it can't be answered. He further suggests using technology to facilitate the vote. Remember, every meeting the Wisconsin Elections Commission had, starting from March 12th on, was done via Zoom. Every meeting, within hours, they could figure out how to meet using technology, but the thought of using it to actually make the law work with special voting deputies eluded them. Commissioner Knudsen states, we should be doing this, we should be doing that, but we should not follow this law during this pandemic. Chair Jacobson, at the bottom there, she states that she's trying to interpret the state law, special voting deputies, 6.875, with other laws or rulings of the health department. Well, there is no other law. There's 6.875 and nothing else. There's no, at one point she says she's trying to interpret these two laws so they can exist in harmony. There are no two laws. There's one law, the special voting deputy law, and it says special voting deputies are to be utilized, and staff shall not be utilized. It is clear. This is actually the letter that is sent after that September meeting. And it states, this is sent to all care facilities, and it's blown up right here. It says how to assist the voter in filling out their absentee ballots. This is sent to residential care facilities, basically nursing homes. And they're instructing the employees of the nursing homes who explicitly cannot assist in the vote. They say, if a voter requests assistance, you may read the ballot, including candidates' names, party affiliations, and ballot instructions to the voter, or mark the ballot as directed by the voter. Believe it or not, that is the completion of the crime right there. Crimes throughout the state, all 72 counties, every nursing home, resident care facility right there, that, according to 12.13, which we're going to get into, that is a violation of state law. Continuing with our timeline. We're actually into 2021. The presidential election has come and gone. We don't care how people vote. We do care that the laws of the state of Wisconsin were not followed by the government of the state of Wisconsin. But we're all the way into January of 2021 with no legal ability, citing no law. The Wisconsin Elections Commission, on a 5-1 vote, again votes to suspend following this law. And Commissioner Knudsen, it's kind of interesting here, and I call it the evolution of their thought process. At first, everyone's on board. Yeah, don't follow the law, it's a program. Okay? Now it appears that he's starting to figure it out to some degree, and I'm being respectful because I'm just reading his quotes, but he literally states, we're telling the clerks to break the law. He goes on to state that we're the ones directing them to break the law. He suggests, he's on board with Commissioner Spindell now, maybe we should use technology so all of the policies as required by law are being followed. He further states, this is kind of my position, the SPD law is a law. Prohibitions on visitors and nursing homes was a guidance, a directive. There is no other law. This here is the bookend. There's two bookends. This timeline starts with the governor's office saying to the Wisconsin Elections Commission, you can't do this. We don't have the power to suspend the law, even during an emergency. They do it for whatever it is, 10 months. They do it through multiple elections. Every time they advise municipalities falsely, we're going to find out that's a violation of law. But finally, the Legislative Council comes forward, and there's also a committee for the review of administrative rules, and it is stated that state law does not empower the WEC to waive the special voting deputies, nor does this law contain an exemption for a pandemic. It's not necessarily Sergeant Llewellyn saying they're breaking the law. It's not necessarily the sheriff's office saying they're breaking the law. It is the governor's office saying they can't do this. it's the Legislative Council saying they can't do this, and it's the Joint Committee for the Review of Administrative Rules that is telling the Wisconsin Elections Commission they are giving illegal advice. I should say that the Joint Committee for the Review of Administrative Rules also notifies the Wisconsin Elections Commission you have to go through the formal process of promulgating or writing an emergency rule, and if you can't do that, you must cease issuing these directives. On March 2nd, 2021, the Wisconsin Elections Commission has another meeting that you can view. All these meetings you can view online, and they basically acknowledge that we're not going to be able to go through this process to formally issue an emergency rule, and they decide we're going to cease issuing this directive. They attempt to allege that they did nothing wrong, and I guess that's where we don't really agree. So, one of their positions is that no one could get into residential care facilities. And that position changed. Sometimes SPDs could get in, other times maybe they couldn't. So what I did is I pulled the visitation logs for the Ridgewood Care Center from March 13th, the day after the order came out from the governor, Executive Order 72, and the day after the Wisconsin Election Commission issued their first ruling saying don't use special voting deputies.
This is 2020?
This is 2020, yes sir. So it's March 13th, 2020 through the end of November 2020. In that time frame, you're going to see that 899, just call them 900 civilian visitors entered that facility, and 333 employees were in and out of that facility. Let's look at who those visitors were. Those visitors included the Orkin man, they included laundry repair, elevator repair, the vendor, job interviews, just interviewing for a job. You can do that anywhere. They included instructors with students. They included the fish cleaning guy 11 times. They included the person who cleaned the bird cage. We have clean bird cage 3 times, copier, even DoorDash. Those people were allowed in to the Ridgewood Care Facility, but heaven forbid we make an exception for special voting deputies or use technology. You know, one of the main jobs of an investigator is to talk to people. And today I talked to Judy, and she informed me that she was allowed to visit her mother in some type of enclosed plexiglass. I kind of envisioned like a phone booth from back in the day. So they could facilitate visitation between Judy and her mother through putting up partitions, but they can never come to the thought process that maybe we could do this to follow the law. So I told you 6.875, now we're going to hit 12.13. I don't name statutes. The legislature comes together, passes law, and names statutes. It just so happened this statute is called election fraud. We're stating that the rules weren't followed. We're stating that the integrity of the vote was put into question. The legislature has a law called election fraud. And there's a variety of different ways to violate this statute, but the first one, in my opinion, fits. In the course of a person's official duties or on account of the person's official position, intentionally violate or intentionally cause any other person to violate any provisions of chapters 5 through 12 for which there's no penalty listed. And it just so happens that the penalty for violating this statute is a Class I felony. It's a felony. I don't make the rules. This is what the legislature has decided. The 3 violations beneath are misdemeanors. Realize this. These laws aren't broken. Let me say it a different way. The government doesn't have to prove that their loved ones were taken advantage of. That's not the law that we're alleging was violated. It is violated when the proper procedures are not followed. And that is clearly what has happened here. I'm not going to go through all of these clips, but I actually took time to include some of the statements that blew my mind, where they basically just admitted to breaking the law. I'm gonna play two clips. They're roughly 20, 30 seconds apiece. This is Knudsen, Commissioner Knudsen, and I kind of referenced what he was saying before, but literally I want you to hear it from the commissioners. Oh,
I have had discomfort, and I expressed it publicly the day that I had first suggested this, that we will be essentially telling the clerks to break the law. And over the ensuing months since, I first wrote to the governor about my concern about the effect of the COVID virus in the elderly back in mid-March of last year, so it's 10 months ago now. Is there some other way that we can accomplish the same thing, to make this guidance rather than us, formally directing them not to do it? I mean,
next clip, last clip. You can watch the other one inside, just on your own time. This is just for brevity.
Earlier it was said that we were trying to reconcile two conflicting laws. I've never really looked at that. The SVD law is a law. Some of the prohibitions on visitors to nursing homes, in the early days of the pandemic, it came down from the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare that it was a guidance, a directive. It wasn't clear whether it actually carried the force of law. Later, the governor had 60 days. That ended. The DHS has been operating under certain emergency powers. Certainly not clear that it's a law. But the law does say that SVD should go in.
So where do we go from here? This is why we have a sheriff. He's going to speak on that. I would note that we set up a special telephone number. I set up a special email account. Please share that. If people have questions or concerns, I am a resource, and I'm going to turn it back over to the sheriff. Thank you.
That's a lot of information, obviously, and obviously we went through this dozens and dozens of times, and I know most of you in this room have heard it for the first time, and a lot of new words, SVDs and WEC, but part of our job too is education, and the good question here, the best question I think we're going to take away is where do we go from here? We're just one of 72 counties, Racine County. Ridgewood is one of 11 type facilities within our county. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of these facilities throughout the entire state of Wisconsin. We would be foolish to think for a moment that this integrity issue, this violation of the statute occurred to just a small group of people at one care facility in one county in the entire state. I would submit to you that this needs the Attorney General's attention. I would submit to you the Attorney General should launch an immediate investigation into the Wisconsin Elections Commission and the harm that they have done to all of these individuals and restore some level of integrity and trust back into our election system. As I mentioned at the beginning of my comments, at the end of the day, we all want to have fair elections. We all want to make certain that our vote counts. And when people break the law, we all want them held accountable. So with that said, I'll entertain questions you may have.
Sheriff, based on your authority, are you planning to refer any charges from anyone at that facility?
As I mentioned at the beginning, as we do in all criminal investigations, we investigate, we are the fact finders, we put all those investigative reports together, and they will be forwarded to our district attorney for her review and ultimate charging decision.
Have they been sent to Tricia yet?
We are in the process.
Okay,
And has anybody been arrested at all throughout all this?
We have not taken anybody into custody.
What about the other nursing homes in your county?
Again, this is the only the only facility that has come forward so far. But my suspicion is, this is the first time we have gone public with our information, is that we're going to get complaints, and not just here in Racine County. My suspicion is that you're going to see, you've seen Sergeant Well outline, this directive was given to all of the 72 counties. I have to believe that this is going to take place in every county across our state.
And if I can just add to that, The unfortunate consequence of not following the law is having people victimized. But the crime is not necessarily having these people victimized. The crime, according to the statute, is the Wisconsin Election Commission telling other officials of the vote to not follow the law. That's the crime. So the crime is completed throughout the state. It's already done. By their letters, by their directives, they have committed crime after crime after crime in all 72 counties throughout the state. The fact that it leads to victimization is a horrible end result. That's bad. But the crime's already done.
Can you speak to the, like, what the crime would be at the, you showed the statute of somebody who like misleads a voter.
Yeah, I'm here.
Let me see, was it a crime of directing another to direct someone incorrectly? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's gonna be at the bottom of your timeline here. There's 4 statutes right there. I would submit that the first statute, which is basically telling other voting officials not to follow the law or what they're supposed to be doing, I'm paraphrasing here, of course, that is a crime in and of itself. The fact that the employees then did things like receive a ballot when they're not supposed to, offer assistance when they're not supposed to, I would submit that they're somewhat of a party to that violation. But the first one, I would submit they committed directly.
That's the first one under chapter 12.
Well, it's the first one I listed, so it's technically 12.13 sub 2 sub B as in boy sub 7.
The legislature is debating this, as I'm sure you guys know, as we speak in their reviews as well. A lot of this is legislative function, right? What is your role in this investigation? Is it just to urge the AG to get involved or the legislature to make fixes as opposed to any potential criminal charges?
I would submit to you that our role, as I mentioned earlier, is to shed light on the WEC. This isn't a Racine County issue. This is an entire state of Wisconsin issue about the Wisconsin Elections Commission, knowingly. And they are the subject matter experts. Now, when we talk about the folks that work at Ridgewood, Sergeant Little talked about some 18-year-old girl. They're not the subject matter experts. And I'm not suggesting that they're not, involved in this, but they're just going off of what they were told by people who are supposed to know the law and people that discussed openly. You heard them talk about how they're going to violate the law. So the purpose of this is to shed light on what I believe is a statewide problem. There's clear violations of the law. You don't need to be a lawyer to recognize and read what happened here. And this really ought to grab the Attorney General's opinion of the state of Wisconsin.
Do you want anyone charged from the facility?
I want to see our election process restored and show that we have integrity in our process and that we know that every one of our votes count.
And if I can add to that, I am a criminal investigator. My job, we receive an allegation, I investigate it and find out if there's any there. It's not necessarily my job to say how we're gonna fix this, where it goes after I submit my reports. Our position is quite simple. I receive an assignment, I investigated it to its logical conclusion, and we are telling the public what we found. We are not urging votes to be overturned, we're not urging elections to be overturned. We don't even urge charges. We work collaboratively with prosecutors and try to come to the best results. But ultimately, charging is in the hands of whatever prosecutor, be it county or state. What is going to happen to the WEC is up to the legislature. We've discussed, we call on Democrats and Republicans. They appoint these commissioners, the majority of which, 5-to-1 votes, are telling people throughout the state of Wisconsin to not follow the law. I believe that's problematic.
But what do you think of the DA having the DA had this complaint 10 months ago or more and didn't file charges?
No, what the DA did was receive the complaint, an affidavit, and basically said, go figure this out. Then I was assigned to do the investigation. I certainly discuss matters with the DA's office. We have a wonderful working relationship. We really haven't formally submitted it for charging or anything like that. What I did do is uncover all this. We've had discussions, but it is so complicated that I've been doing this for 10 months, and it's going to take more time.
Are you
Hang
recommending
on a
us
second, I'm
bring?
going to finish this. So, to our district attorney's office, it's not uncommon for her to get a complaint and then send it to a respective law enforcement agency for follow-up and investigation. And that's exactly what it does here.
Can you say why Racine County and not Mount Pleasant took it? Or did she just pick whichever one she, like, I don't mean some people, why was Racine County assigned to Ridgewood instead of Mount Pleasant?
That would be a question you would have to ask the district attorney. My suspicion is that, you know, when it's happening at one facility, I suspect you thought it was probably happening in multiple jurisdictions within Racine County, and I have authority throughout the entire county. So, but again, I'm not the district attorney spokesperson.
Are you recommending?
How about you, sir? You've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Sheriff, and thank you, Sergeant, for all of this work. Can't imagine what this must have been like the last 10 months. And thank you to the families who are here, who showed the courage. I have 2 or 3 real quick questions. They're basically yes or no. Have you started working with any of the other 71 sheriffs and the DAs and the clerks in those counties? Or are you at liberty to say?
I have not, but I can tell you that I fully expect that after our press conference here today, now that it's been gone public, that this is going to be something that the other 71 sheriffs and other law enforcement municipalities are most likely to be feeling a fair number of faults.
Thank you. 2 quick follow-ups. Sergeant, do you have what you're going to share with us in a paper format as well as a digital format? How will we get those?
We have thumb drives, and that's the way we're going to dispense
We'll
them.
get- okay.
Yes, and if we run out, my captain's a little more savvy, we might do a Dropbox.
And then the last quick question that I have, and I can see you afterwards, through open records with the city of Racine and Racine County and the mayor's office, and I'll show this to you afterwards because I don't want you to comment on something you haven't seen. We have some very disturbing connections between some of the things that you shared today with the mayor's office, with the clerk's office, that I'd like to show you afterwards. Perhaps you already have them as part of your investigation, but I think it will complement what you're trying to get done today on election integrity. Thank you.
Absolutely. So here's what we're going to do. We've answered a number of questions already. Out of respect for the families that are here today, we are a little over an hour here into this conference. What we will do is after we escort the families out, the sergeant and I will certainly entertain additional questions that you have, okay? So thank you for your
Sheriff, can I
patience.
just ask quickly, I know none of you.
We have no
want to
interest in
comment.
talking, I've already
Oh,
discussed
yeah,
that, so
no, I mean,
please
just
respect that.
on behalf of them though, is it fair to say that of the 7 families you identified, that they did not want their loved ones to vote? Is that a fair characterization?
So it's 8 total. It's Judy's mother Shirley, and then 7 additional. And I want to be very careful here. People have a right to vote. People have varying degrees of understanding, and I get that. And people who, you know, you don't need a PhD to vote, all right? But these loved ones believe their loved ones had such cognitive difficulties that they would not have had the ability to request a ballot and exercise their right to vote. And I think when you look at those slides that I kind of went through a little bit quickly, there's people who can't recognize their own sons and daughters. There's people, once again, who can't remember what they ate. There's people who are only interested in Doritos and Snickers. There's people who won't sign any other type of legal documents. And there's one woman, and she was very adamant and very offended that someone did that to her mother. So that is not the crime per se, but that is the unfortunate result of having a government not following their own laws.
When you say they were being preyed on, where does the
I never
blame
said
lie
prey. I never
for,
said prey.
for taking advantage of the elderly?
I never said prey.
All right, we can go back to the
Okay,
video.
I'm gonna go back to what I said, so we're gonna, out of respect for the families that are here, we're gonna go ahead and escort them out now. So please hold off on your questions. Folks, thank you again so much for being brave.
Thank you. Yeah, it might be easier this way.
Again, just watch the cables.
Stand up. Yep.
Guys, if you want to tell me just what news channel you're with, I'll get you over Who's the reporter? Okay. I'll just try to leave my hand early. I guess. We're covered for it. Thank you.
And just so you know, on that thumb drive is obviously the PowerPoint, the timeline, and actually it's the redacted version of the reports, approximately about 65 pages. And there are more details in the reports. This is a summary, and this is a summary of a summary. Okay, there's a lot of detail there.
You mentioned you talked to like 28 to 38 families. Can we just assume that the 8 that didn't come forward said, no, mom's fine, mom can vote?
I'll wait for the sheriff, but yeah, I certainly, and I started the conversation, I think I said in my initial remarks, that I hope that people have strong mental function, and I certainly did have people say, no, dad was great, mom was great. Yep.
So it's 40.
Can we just wait for the sheriff?
There's 48 total families that you contacted?
I attempted, I didn't get in contact with everybody.
And 8 of them, 7, but then you added the 8, so 8 of 48 or whatever.
Of the ones I could reach, I didn't reach everybody, but I attempted.
But 8 of them got back.
I think the slide said 42, it is 48,
Let me double check for you. If it said 42, it should be 42.
whatever the slide said.
Yeah, I think you're right, it is 42.
It said 42 on the
Yeah,
slide.
let's do, hey, just so everyone's clear, it's 42, not 48, 42 families. Scroll down.
8 of 42. So I think so.
We all took our jobs because we're not men.
That is fair.
Not a single math grader.
So are you guys now going to continue this process at other homes, or is it now kind of?
We'll wait for the sheriff to come back, okay? I know you guys are antsy, and I wish he was here too. I see the captain just walked out, so hopefully, but when you run the organization, you set the time limit. It's kind of like when I was in court, the judge is never late.
How long have you been with the sheriff's office? That's it.
2 years and change.
Oh.
Yeah. 2.5 maybe. But I was with a law enforcement agency before that, and then with the DA's office before
What,
that.
with a?
Oh, great police department.
Oh.
Yeah. So I've been doing this for about 21 years. They had a couple questions, I just told them to just wait.
Oh, certainly. Thank you for your patience.
Were any of the 8 determined by a judge or a court to not have that cognitive ability?
Right, there is an official ruling a court can make where then someone cannot legally vote. It was my understanding that only one of them has a legal representative, and that legal representative told me that that finding was made on that individual, and that individual still did vote. The other individuals did not, so now we're down to 7 of the 8, did not have that official legal finding, and that's why I'm not saying that them voting was necessarily a crime. What I am saying is their loved ones believe that that elderly resident was taken advantage of, and they thought that was inappropriate.
Sheriff, during this news conference, former President Trump put out a statement about this news conference. Just curious, have you talked to anyone on his team or Speaker Voss or anyone like Gabelin's office as your review went on over the past couple months?
No, and as I mentioned at the beginning of my comments, I'm not affiliated with any other investigation that's going on. My knowledge of those investigations is probably as much as you know in terms of what the news media has told me and what I've read in the newspaper. This is an investigation that, as I mentioned again at the onset, this is something we went out to seek and look for and find people like Judy to come forward. This came to us, and as the sheriff, it is my job to investigate crime that occurred within the county. That is exactly what I did.
Do you anticipate?
These are the findings. And it's not my decision to decide who gets charged, if anybody, but I know one thing. As a citizen of this state, of this country, I want to see our election process fixed. I want to see that the laws are followed, and I want to make certain that my vote and your vote counts. That's all I'd like to see come out of this. It's best to say this again. I'm not looking to overturn some election. I'm not looking to overturn a single vote. I just want to draw attention to a clear violation of state law, and I want to see that repaired. I want to see the people who violate it held accountable, and it doesn't happen again.
Are you asking for the Wisconsin Election Commission? Are you recommending charges on any individual members for the commission?
As I mentioned again, my job in law enforcement, our job in the investigation is to find the facts, collect those facts, document those facts, present them to our district attorney for her review and ultimate charging decision. She can work with the Attorney General's office, I presume, perhaps to launch an investigation throughout the state, depending upon when all the folks watch this presentation and start thinking about their loved ones in these residential care facilities. when we think about it, and I know the Sergeant Llewellyn said this, but we keep talking about, the end result, Judy and her mom and all the rest, but when we really think about it, we have a Wisconsin Elections Commission who failed to follow the law. Everything else that happened at is sort of the unfortunate result. We need to start at the top where this occurred.
That's why I asked. about the
Exactly, but that is not my decision, sir. It's not
Sergeant,
my
can you
decision.
clarify, so where are we? I think I heard you say you have not officially referred the cases to the district attorney, just procedurally walk me through.
Right, we've had conversations, extensive conversations with the district attorney and one of her talented assistant DAs. We haven't officially sent any paperwork over. I just think this case is so detailed, so complex, and quite honestly, this is a state level case. This case is more adequately investigated at the state level. When you have crimes occurring throughout the state of Wisconsin, all 72 counties, yes, we have our little slice of the pie here, and maybe we can deal with it. But why this wouldn't be dealt with at the state level, be it the Attorney General's office, be it the Division of Criminal Investigation, is beyond me. And I understand that people above my pay grade ultimately make those decisions, but I think we're doing a lot of great work here, a lot of hard work here, but somebody else should start doing some of the heavy lifting also.
Can you speak to why there's a press conference and we're kind of, I don't want to say ended, with kind of middle of the investigation as more investigation continues?
I respect your opinion, and I think this is a natural stopping point of the investigation. To answer your question, are we gonna look for more people who have been taken advantage of? We could, but you really gotta focus on, and we've said this a couple times, the law was broken with the advice of the WEC to not follow the law. That is the problem. We can find more unfortunate victims, if you will, or results of that, but that's kind of why we can stop here and take a pause, because according to the law that the legislature writes, which is called election fraud, not following the law is just that. And we have proved through their letters, through their own words, that they advise people, clerks throughout the state of Wisconsin, once again, to not follow the law. That's the violation. Finding more people who've been victimized is relevant, but legally, maybe it's not that important.
They're saying the WEC violated the law, the
Yes.
Wisconsin election. So wouldn't that be the party that you would recommend charges today?
I mean, a DA can charge, or the Attorney General can charge whomever they see fit. When I was a prosecutor, when the sheriff was an investigator, we worked together. If he sends in a referral on one person, and I make a decision that 5 people did it, guess what? As the prosecutor, I charge all 5. A prosecutor is not bound by the charges that are sent over or what names are on that document. A prosecutor at the county or state level, and most appropriately state level, can make appropriate prosecutorial decisions. I simply I'm a fact finder, okay? I write reports, I talk to people, I document stuff, I get documents, and I send it out. It is up to them to decide. And we're not kicking the can down the road, but we have a criminal justice system. There's police officers, there's prosecutors, there's judges, there's prisons, okay? Everyone has a part to this system, and we're asking for the people next in line to take their part and to do their job.
So are you going to refer the case or send anything to the DA, and when?
We've been in conversations. We will continue to have conversations. I think the sheriff has called for what is much more appropriate, and that being a statewide investigation. The sheriff has offered my documents, my reports to the Attorney General's office. They chose not to accept those reports.
When was that?
That was earlier in the year, say Marchish or something like that. But we're extending our offer again. I don't want to speak for you.
Absolutely. We've done it before. The Attorney General and his staff, we spoke with them on a conference line, and we explained the investigation that was unfolding, because I felt, as we are probably all thinking today, that this is going to turn into a statewide investigation, so I wanted to bring them on board early on. I offered all of our investigative reports, that we had nothing to hide. You can have all these reports, take a look at them for your review. I even offered, I think everyone in this room would agree that Sergeant Llewellyn certainly has some talents here, and is sort of I would call him an expert in what he's accomplished here, but he certainly has done a lot of heavy lifting. And I offered to send him to Madison to assist their investigators to see what we've unfolded and to sort of better explain it. That offer was declined. And they decided that they didn't want our investigative reports, that there was nothing to see here. And I think after we watched this today and heard the presentation, I have to believe, it doesn't matter who you vote for, how you vote, or what side of the party line you are. This is a problem, ladies and gentlemen. This is a law that was broken. And everybody who votes ought to feel the pain of that. You want to walk out of that voting booth knowing that your vote counts. And today, I don't feel that. Because the law is being snubbed, it's being disregarded.
So as of now, is it fair to say you will not be referring charges or the case to the local DA?
As I mentioned from the beginning, we will always send our investigative reports to our district attorney's office. When that happens, I'll work closely with the lead investigator. I suspect it'll be soon, but we have been working closely with the district attorney. We do have a great working relationship with her. She is aware that we are doing this press conference today, but she has not had a chance to review all of these documents. So in fairness to her and her team, we would like her to have the opportunity to do that. I'm hoping that today this has grabbed the attention of the Attorney General and most likely other individuals around our state to recognize that we do have a problem on our hands, that the law was in fact violated. You heard it from their own mouth. We heard those words. There's no doubt in my mind that this occurred. And it is called election fraud. That is the name of the statute. As the sergeant put it, we don't name statutes, okay? That is what it's called. It is clearly violated it. The Attorney General should, in my view, jump on board, ask for our investigative reports, and launch an immediate investigation throughout the entire state.
If his office doesn't,
Yeah.
if Josh Call's office doesn't take it up, and he goes to DOJ, what are the next steps? Are we gonna just kind of hit a dead? Why would you guys hit a dead end?
Well, I think we're sort of like repeating ourselves here now. As I mentioned, we're going to give this to our district attorney. We need to let, as the sergeant mentioned, there's an entire process. We have done our part of the process. It is now someone else's line to do that other job.
I think I misphrased my question. So if the DOJ doesn't take it, does anyone else have like a state level authority to investigate this, or is it really just the DOJ, Josh Call's office?
That would be a great question for our attorney general.
Yeah.
I have a question
So,
about your actual investigation. Do you have any reason to believe through your investigation that some of these staff were intentionally biasing some of the votes, that they tried to impart what they wanted the person to vote as what they voted? Did you find anything like that?
No, I will tell you that I investigated one care facility which has 50 to 100 residents. I will submit that Commissioner Spindell is kind of in the Milwaukee area. He has large facilities, and he stated hundreds of ballots are floating around these various facilities. Can I say that someone did or did not? No. Can I say that that seems right for a problem? Yeah. I as a voter myself, I don't want ballots floating around willy-nilly in people's hands who are not trained and not qualified. That is bad.
Well, one last question, and then we're going to stop.
Thank you,
for
Sheriff.
Yes,
Real
go ahead.
quick, Sergeant or Sheriff, have either of you in your reports or your recommendations or referrals, that the next election cycle starts in 30 days. If this is not addressed immediately, this is my statement, this is gonna happen again in 22. Have either of you made recommendations going, hey, you gotta get your foot on the gas pedal, because if this is happening now, has that come up in your recommendations or your thought process or your analysis?
Well, naturally, anytime there's a violation of the law, it grabs our attention. And that is one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this forward to our community. So we do, to your point, someone needs to put their foot on the gas pedal to get the state of Wisconsin to wake up and look at what the WC has done. And we need it to stop. Where does it go from there? These are big decisions that have to be made at big top levels throughout our state. But today is just a stepping stone. We are just one cog in a very, very large wheel.
Thank you, Sheriff.
But I want to say thank you to everyone for coming here today. If you should have some follow-up questions, you know how to get a hold of us. We can certainly entertain those
Can you
questions.
get
at a later
Shirley's
date.
last
But-
name?
No,
Why?
because I want to protect her privacy.
But she's deceased.
Oh, well, no, because that's going to tell you who Judy is.
I mean, yeah, she
That's
could've
all
changed
I'm
her